Good evening, fellow gamers and diurnal beings, and welcome. It's my honor tonight to serve as a moderator for a classic game entitled Werewolves of Millers Hollow. Now, the goal during the course of this game is for you to fall asleep, but we can have some fun while we're doing it. The small, nearly forgotten village of Millers Hollow is having a bit of a crisis. It seems some of the residents are transforming into lycanthropes by night and devouring their fellow residents. It took quite a few deaths before the villagers finally realized the source of their problem. And their reaction was, as many in that dark time, to simply kill people whom they suspected of being lichen, with often very little evidence of their nature. And so, in this game, all of you assume the roles of residents of the ill-fated Millers Hollow. Some of you will be residents by day, werewolves by night. The rest of you will be simple villagers, although some of you will have special powers with which you can fight this werewolf scourge. And I'll go over that in a moment. But the key thing to remember here is this is just a game. It's just a game. It might help for you to repeat that to yourself as a sort of mantra if you find anxiety overcoming your ability to relax and drift off into the land of Nod, because that's the real goal here. Not really winning or losing. You see, I have a pile of cards here in front of me. Each of these cards represents a villager or some specially designated villager or a werewolf in a villager costume. Now, when I distribute these cards, if you see one that on the back shows you as a villager, rejoice. You are still a human. And despair, because you are mortal and very possibly a target and future victim of the werewolves inhabiting your village. There are 5 villagers left in Millers Hollow, although you could see these as representing perhaps 10 people each, or 5 families. It's your choice. If you receive a card that reveals you to be a werewolf, you'll not want to let anyone know this fact. There are, as of right now, 2 werewolves, or 20, in the village of Millers Hollow, and they are keeping quite busy setting about their foul work, feasting on the hapless villagers. And yet, I say hapless, but the villagers are not entirely without their own agency and abilities. One of these villagers is the witch. Now, in any other circumstances, it is the witch who would normally be persecuted and burnt at the stake, have her remains buried in multiple distant locations. But, for the time being at least, the residents of Millers Hollow have decided to unite against the greater threat of werewolves. Perhaps when it's all over, the witch will get what is coming to them. One of you villagers will be the witch, and the witch possesses 2 abilities. 1, the ability to heal someone who has been mortally wounded by a werewolf. And the second ability of the witch is the polar opposite of the healing potion. For, yes, the witch also possesses a potion of poison and has the ability to kill one player during the night. Once the witch has used these 2 potions, which they can only do once a game, they are as helpless and at the mercy of the werewolves as any other citizen. But it is a powerful position to occupy. Of course, if you are a werewolf and you happen to discover the identity of the witch, you're probably going to target the witch as soon as possible. So, just like the werewolves want to keep their identity unknown, the witch too wants to hide behind her guise of being a normal villager. Next, one of the villagers is the fortune teller. Now, the fortune teller has the ability once per day, or more accurately, once per night, to point at a person, and the moderator, c'est moi, will let them know via a thumbs up or a thumbs down gesture whether or not the person they pointed to was a werewolf. The fortune teller can then use that information in the deliberations which take place while the sun is out and the werewolves are hiding, to try and make sure that werewolves are eliminated and not villagers. However, much like the witch, if the werewolves catch wind with their exceedingly sensitive olfactory systems, the identity of the fortune teller, they're very likely to target that villager the next night. For the werewolves have the ability to kill one villager per night. Next, the little girl. The little girl's superpower is curiosity. The little girl will sometimes stay up late at night and might chance a peek at a wolf in sheep's clothing, removing said sheep's clothing. Essentially, the little girl has the ability to peek at any time she wishes during the night to get an idea of who might be a werewolf. However, if the little girl is seen and identified by the werewolves, of course, they will target her. And finally, the hunter. The hunter's ability is selfless. It can only be activated once the hunter has been killed by a werewolf. The hunter's ability is they can shoot and kill one other villager when they are themselves killed by werewolves. Now, unlike the hidden identities of the other villagers, the hunter doesn't mind so much if the werewolves know who the hunter is. They might be a little reluctant to kill a hunter in fear that the hunter will shoot back, as it were. And finally, although this is not a role belonging to just one villager, there is the sheriff. The sheriff simply has an additional vote whenever villagers are deciding at their council meetings every afternoon who might be a werewolf and thus who should be hung and killed. Now, just to make things nice and even, since we have 5 villagers, I'm going to go ahead and assign the sheriff to one of the villagers. So, we have no villagers that are just villagers. They are either werewolves, a hunter, a little girl, the sheriff, the fortune teller, or the witch. The game proceeds as follows. There is a day cycle during which the villagers may all discuss their ideas on who is or is not a werewolf. And they will vote. As mentioned, the sheriff gets 2 votes on a villager to lynch for that day. When the sun sets, the werewolves awaken while the villagers are asleep, with the exception, of course, of the little girl, who may or may not be peeking between the gaps of of her fingers. During the night cycle, the werewolves deliberate which villager they would like to consume. And of course, as mentioned before, not all villagers are created equal. There are some villagers the werewolves would like to get out of the way as soon as possible, namely the little girl, the witch, and the fortune teller. Probably the fortune teller first. It's very important to be quiet when playing this game. You don't know who you're sitting next to. If you are sitting next to a werewolf and it is nighttime and you hear the person next to you lift their head or move, you might grow suspicious of the villager sitting next to you, and thus the next council meeting you might want to get rid of that villager. There are all kinds of social interactions at play during this game. Bluffing, double bluffing, trying to lead people on, perhaps making noises seem to come from somewhere they're not coming from. Perhaps, as a werewolf, you might even argue against your fellow werewolf, especially if they've been pretty much nailed by the fortune teller or the little girl. The game ends when either all the villagers are dead or all the werewolves are dead. Actually, the game can end a little sooner if there are no werewolves killed and only one villager left. The game will end then too. So let's begin. I'm going to hand out the villager cards first. The witch, the fortune teller, the little girl, the hunter, the sheriff, this is my tobacco. It does not factor into the game at all. And of course, the two werewolves. Night falls on Millers Hollow. Villagers, close your eyes. Fortune teller, wake up. Fortune teller, please point at the player whose identity you would like to know. Fortune teller, go back to sleep. Werewolves, wake up. Please point to the villager you would like to devour. You may take a moment. It's a rainy night in Millers Hollow. Werewolves, go back to sleep. Witch, open your eyes. Witch, the werewolves have done things unspeakable to a villager. Would you like to use your healing potion to save that villager? No. Would you like to use your poison on any of the villagers? Witch, go back to sleep. Residents of Millers Hollow, open your eyes and wake up to a new dawn. A dawn made less grand for the fact that during the night the werewolves have killed the hunter. Hunter, before you leave the game, you have the ability to take one shot at someone. You are not required to take the shot, but if you have an idea who the werewolves are, now would be the time to do it. The hunter has decided that since there was no day cycle in which to figure out who may or may not be the werewolf, they were not going to take the chance of killing an innocent villager, and instead accepted their fate with equanimity. Villagers, there are 4 of you left, and 2 werewolves. Please, take a moment or two to discuss who you think you should lynch. I'll be over here, playing with my tobacco. A salient point. An excellent counterpoint. Now, why would you say that? That's true. Counsel, have you come to a conclusion on who you believe is a werewolf and therefore should be lynched? You have. You heard things. Who, might I ask? And you are all in agreement. When a lycanthrope dies, it reveals its true form. When a human dies, they typically simply soil themselves. In this case, you have incorrectly identified the sheriff as a werewolf. And yet, for whatever it's worth, the sheriff died with dignity and grace, and there was no soiling involved. Sadly, however, this now leaves you with 3 villagers left and 2 werewolves. And the deliberations you just went through, well, they took the majority of the day. The sun now hangs low in the sky, and it is time for the villagers to go to sleep. Villagers, close your eyes. Fortune teller, wake up. Fortune teller, point to a player whose identity you would like to reveal. Fortune teller, close your eyes. Go back to sleep. Werewolves, wake up. Werewolves, talk amongst yourselves and, well, don't talk. But use your eyes and your telepathic link and point to a villager you would like to devour. So be it. Werewolves, go to sleep. Witch, open your eyes. Witch, would you care to use your healing potion to save the villager targeted by the werewolves? Yes. Witch, go back to sleep. It's a dry night in Millers Hollow this night. And when the sun rises the next morning, we find a villager who has been beaten, cut, and bruised, but ultimately saved by the healing potion of the witch. The witch now has only a poison potion left, and there are still 2 werewolves and 3 villagers left. Council, you are now without a sheriff, without a hunter. It is time to assemble and to determine which of you think you should lynch. While you are doing that, I will play with my silicone popping toy. Oh, I hadn't thought of that. Now, let's keep things civil. I got them all. Oh, just start right over again. Council, have you made your decision? Yes. Up the gallows the villager goes, to hang by the rope until dead. As the villager dangles their neck, not broken by the drop, you see them transform into a much more hirsute and fanged version of themselves. Council, congratulations. You have ferreted out the identity of one of the werewolves, leaving but one werewolf left. Good job. The body is burned, the ashes scattered, the requisite celebrations for a job well done go on for the remainder of the day, until again the sun sits heavy on the horizon. It is once more time for the village of Millers Hollow, consisting of 3 villagers and 1 werewolf, to go to sleep. Villagers, close your eyes. Fortune teller, wake up. Fortune teller, point at a player whose identity you would care to reveal. Fortune teller, close your eyes. Werewolf, wake up. Werewolf, please point to the villager you want to devour. Werewolf, go back to sleep. Witch, wake up. Witch, would you care to use your poison potion on anyone? Witch, go back to sleep. The night is long and nearly moonless, and dawn is terribly, terribly tainted by the fact that the villagers wake up to find dead in her bed the little girl. Was she identified by the werewolf? Was it simply luck? No. Gosh, it is getting awfully quiet around here. There are but 2 villagers left, and 1 werewolf. Council, it is time to convene. Please, discuss amongst yourselves who you think is worthy of hanging by the neck until dead. While you do that, I will be playing with my silicone toy and my tobacco simultaneously. That's true. I noticed that myself, but didn't want to say anything. Have you completed your deliberations? I'm not sure if you realize the momentousness of this decision, for it determines the outcome of the game. Who have you chosen to send to the gallows? Then you are both in agreement about this. Obviously, you would not be. Yes. Well, we've certainly heard that before, haven't we? The resident of Millers Hollow, you have chosen to lynch marches slowly and grimly up the makeshift platform, calling out behind them, "What a horrible mistake you have made," as they dangle from the rope. The life drains from their body, and it remains human. It is, in fact, the fortune teller who was executed. Now, we find ourselves in a situation where the only two living residents of Millers Hollow left are the witch and a werewolf. The witch has no healing potion left, and even if the witch did have a healing potion left, it cannot be used on themselves. The witch does have a poison potion left. However, the assumption here is that the werewolf will choose to kill the only remaining villager this night, and thus preventing the witch from getting their turn to use their poison potion on the last remaining werewolf. And so the werewolves have won the what? Highly unorthodox. We chose not to use the lovers in this round because there weren't that many players. I understand you're both marginalized members of society. Well, I don't think I've ever encountered this before, but as game master, I'm going to allow it. It seems the witch, long maligned by villages in that era, and even to this day, has very little love for their fellow villagers, and the werewolf admires the witch's ability, power, and they share the common bond of both being marginalized, and thus they've chosen to run off together, start a village of their own. So I suppose that's a happy ending. Maybe not for the little girl, the fortune teller, the sheriff, or the hunter. Maybe not for even your fellow werewolf companion. But what an interesting village the two of you might found. Given this simulation takes place hundreds of years in the past, perhaps an instance like this occurred, and I wonder what sort of town, city, metropolis might have emerged from such a union. One can speculate. I will refrain from doing so. And that, my friends, is Werewolves of Millers Hollow. I can assure you there are no werewolves waiting to devour you when you sleep this evening, unless perhaps you live in whatever hamlet, town these two founded. But then, in that case, you might be a werewolf witch, a witch wolf, a werewitch yourself. It's interesting to ruminate upon. At any rate, it is time. Viewers, close your eyes.